I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. I stood there in shock, my grandmother's words hitting me like a punch straight to the gut. Emma and Jared, my own sister and her fiancé, mocked me? After everything I had done for them? After 3 long years of sending them $800 a month, sacrificing my own comfort, my own dreams just to keep them afloat? And this was how they saw me? Some pathetic, lonely fool to be laughed at? My fingers clenched into fists at my sides. The warm, lively chatter from inside the house suddenly felt distant, like background noise in a bad dream. Grandma patted my arm gently, her expression a mix of sympathy and quiet fury. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice low. "You don't deserve that." No, I definitely didn't. I walked back inside, my face calm but my mind a storm. I watched them, Emma and Jared, laughing with cousins, clinking glasses, acting as if they weren't the most ungrateful people on the planet. I had to swallow the bitter taste rising in my throat. They didn't know that I knew. But they would. The cutoff. That night, I went home and did something I should have done years ago. I pulled up my banking app and canceled the automatic transfers. No warning. No explanation. Just done. The silence lasted exactly 3 weeks. Then one evening my phone rang. Emma. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, Jared called. Ignored. A string of texts followed. "Hey, did something happen with the bank? The money didn't come through this month. Brian? Can you call me? This is really putting us in a tough spot. Can you fix it?" I stared at my screen, my heart pounding, but not with guilt. No. This time it was something else. A dark satisfaction. Let them sweat. The messages turned more frantic as the days passed. Then came the guilt tripping. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. You know we count on you for rent. Please don't do this to us." Then the anger. "Well, after all these years you just cut us off? No warning? No explanation?" An explanation? Oh, I had one. But I wasn't about to waste my breath. Karma hits back. 2 months later, I heard from Grandma again. She didn't need to say much. Her smirk said it all. Emma and Jared had been evicted. The house I had been practically paying for? Gone. Turns out, they had been living far beyond their means, assuming my money would always be there to save them. Without my help, they couldn't even make 2 months' rent. Jared lost his job. Emma had to move back in with Mom and Dad. As for me, I was finally living for myself. No more living frugally for people who didn't respect me. No more sacrificing my happiness for the sake of family. They mocked me behind my back. So I cut them off. And karma did the rest. I wasn't even there when Aunt Laura let Emma have it, but I heard every detail afterward. "You let Brian pay your bills for 3 years and you had the nerve to laugh at him? You and Jared ought to be ashamed of yourselves." Word had traveled fast, and before Emma could spin her usual sob story, people had already made up their minds. My mother, who had originally tried to defend her, was now silent. The rest of the family wasn't buying their excuses anymore. The sympathy well had run dry. Emma and Jared were panicking. They had assumed their situation would be temporary, that I would cave under the pressure and start sending money again. But the reality was settling in. No more easy cash, no more safety net. Jared had already lost hours at work, and Emma was struggling to keep up with wedding expenses. Their once carefree attitude was gone. Now they were scrambling. Emma tried to call me again, but I didn't answer. She texted, "Can we just talk? Please?" I left it on read. Jared messaged me later. "Look man, we've all said things we don't mean. Let's just move on. No hard feelings, right?" Hard feelings? Oh, there were plenty. I just wasn't going to waste my energy on them anymore. Grandma's words stuck with me. "You're not the failure they make you out to be." The trust fund she revealed had nothing to do with revenge or pettiness. It was proof that I had been on the right path all along, even when they mocked me. And now karma was at work. Emma and Jared had spent years living off my kindness while secretly ridiculing me. Now they were facing the consequences. And the best part? I didn't have to do a thing. I simply stepped back and let the universe handle the rest. Emma was livid. She called me not long after the confrontation with Grandma, her voice practically shaking with rage. "What the hell, Brian? Did you tell everyone about the money?" I sighed, keeping my voice calm. "No, Emma. I only told one person. But you brought this on yourself. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" she snapped. I let out a dry laugh. Emma, I think you have bigger problems than embarrassment. Maybe take a look in the mirror and ask yourself why you thought it was okay to treat me like a joke. Silence. She had nothing to say to that. I assumed that was the end of it. But then Jared decided to make things worse. Desperation in the parking lot. He must have been feeling desperate because he showed up at my school one afternoon, waiting for me in the parking lot. Brian, we need to talk, he said, trying to sound calm but clearly agitated. About what? I asked, crossing my arms. Look man, Emma has been crying nonstop. People are turning against us. We just want to make things right. I scoffed. Oh, now you want to make things right? After 3 years of taking my money while laughing behind my back? No thanks, Jared. I'm done being your safety net. His face turned red. You act like we meant to hurt you. It wasn't like that. I cut him off. Then tell me, Jared, how exactly does mocking someone who helps you not hurt them? He opened his mouth but couldn't come up with an answer. Instead, he muttered something about how it was all a misunderstanding and walked off. Dad steps in. Later that night, my father called. He rarely involved himself in drama, so I knew this was serious. Brian, he started, I had a long conversation with Emma and Jared. They're struggling right now, but they regret how they treated you. That's good, I said flatly. But I'm not interested in fixing things. They need to figure out their own problems. Dad sighed. I'm not saying you're wrong. You've been more than generous. But maybe it's time to sit down and have a serious conversation with them. Clear the air. I considered his words. I'll think about it, I finally said. But deep down, I knew I wasn't in a forgiving mood. The family meeting. A week later, I received a handwritten invitation from Emma. An odd touch. She wanted me to meet her and Jared at a cafe near their house for a family meeting. I debated whether to go, but curiosity won out. I figured I'd hear them out, though I wasn't expecting much. When I arrived, the cafe was nearly empty. Emma and Jared were already there, looking overly prepared. Emma had a forced smile on her face, while Jared nervously fidgeted with his phone. Hey, thanks for coming, Emma said as I sat down. Sure. What's this about? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Emma took a deep breath. Look, we just want to apologize. We shouldn't have talked about you that way. It was wrong and we sincerely regret it. Jared nodded. We were frustrated and made some bad jokes. We didn't mean anything by it. I leaned back in my chair, studying them. It all felt rehearsed. Okay, I said. But let me ask you something. If Grandma hadn't told me about the money, would you have ever apologized? They froze. Emma shot Jared a look before he quickly answered, Of course we would have. Eventually. I let out a short laugh. Right. Sure. They shifted uncomfortably. And that's when Emma finally got to the real reason for the meeting. Brian, we need a favor. There it was. I almost laughed. Let me guess, you need money? Not exactly, Emma said hesitantly. We need you to co-sign a loan for us. I stared at her like she had grown a second head. Are you serious? Jared jumped in. We've hit a rough patch and we just need help refinancing the house. If you co-sign, we'll get a better rate. We'll handle the rest. You won't have to pay anything. I was stunned. You've got to be kidding me. You actually think I'd put my name on a loan for you after everything you've done? Emma's face flushed. We're not trying to take advantage of you. We're trying to fix things. I shook my head in disbelief. You don't fix things by begging for more handouts. You fix things by taking responsibility for your own life. Jared slammed his hand on the table. You're being unreasonable, Brian. We're family. I laughed bitterly. Exactly. And family doesn't treat each other like garbage. You're on your own. I tossed a few bucks on the table for my coffee and walked out without another word. The bombshell. A few days later, I got an urgent call from Grandma. Brian, you need to come over. It's important. When I arrived, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from the bank about my trust fund. Emma and Jared had found out about it, and they were demanding a larger share. They went to a lawyer, Grandma said, her voice shaking with anger. They're claiming you withheld family assets. Even though you only found out about it recently. I was floored. You've got to be kidding me. They're desperate, Grandma muttered. But this is low. Even for them. That's when it hit me, they weren't just struggling. They were sinking. And now they were willing to throw me under the bus to save themselves. I'm not going to let them get away with this, I said firmly. Grandma gave me a sad smile. Good. It's about time someone taught them a lesson. Karma comes knocking. The next morning, I got a call from a lawyer representing Emma and Jared. I braced myself for a fight. But to my surprise, the lawyer sounded, almost apologetic. "Mr. Daniels, my clients have decided to withdraw their claim. They'd like to settle this privately." "Why?" I asked, suspicious. There was a pause. "Let's just say, new information has come to light about their financial situation. They realize they have no legal standing." Later that day I found out why. Aunt Laura called me, her voice dripping with amusement. "Did you hear? Jared got fired. Someone reported that he'd been skimming small amounts of company money, and the bank denied their loan application. Their credit is shot. Karma had hit them hard. And I hadn't lifted a finger." Emma's final plea. A few days later, Emma texted me. "We need to talk. Please." I ignored her. The next day she showed up outside my building, pacing nervously. I sighed, stepping out of my car. "What do you want, Emma?" She looked exhausted. "Brian, I didn't know Jared was going to take things this far with the lawyer. I swear I didn't want this." "But you were fine with trying to take my money?" I shot back. She lowered her head. "I'm sorry, okay? We're just under so much stress. The wedding, the house, everything is falling apart." "And whose fault is that?" I asked. She winced. "You're right. But I have no one else to turn to." I shook my head. "I'm done, Emma. This is the last time we talk about money. I don't owe you anything." Her eyes widened. "You can't just cut me off. We're family." I stared at her. "Watch me." And with that I walked inside, leaving her standing in the cold. Grandma's final decision. A few days later I visited Grandma, and she wasted no time getting to the point. "I spoke to the lawyer," she said firmly, "and I've decided, if Emma and Jared can't show responsibility and respect, they won't get their share of the trust. I'm giving them a chance to change, but if they don't, the trust will be divided between you and your cousins instead." I was speechless for a moment. "Grandma, you don't have to do that. I don't even want the money." She smiled knowingly. "I know. That's exactly why you deserve it." Cutting ties for good. After that, I cut off all communication with Emma and Jared. No texts. No calls. I blocked their numbers and removed myself from the family drama entirely. And for the first time in years I felt free. I hadn't realized just how much weight I had been carrying until it was gone. No more guilt. No more obligations. Just peace. The real kicker. Then the final twist came. Jared, having lost his job and their shot at a loan, moved out. Their relationship was crumbling under the pressure. And with nowhere else to go, Emma had to move back in with her mother. I wasn't happy about it, but I couldn't ignore the irony. The same woman who had mocked me for years, who had taken my generosity for granted, who had ridiculed me while benefiting from my kindness, was now back at square one. Meanwhile, I was finally moving forward. At the heart of this story is a simple but powerful lesson. Know your worth and don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. It's one thing to help family, but when people start to see your generosity as an expectation rather than a gift, it's time to reevaluate those relationships. Respect should always go both ways. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find peace. And sometimes karma has a way of handling things better than we ever could. What do you think? Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever been in a situation where someone took your kindness for granted? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, share, and comment below. Let's start a conversation about setting boundaries, self-respect, and learning to stand up for ourselves.